Good evening. Good evening to all of you tonight, and welcome to the 11th Annual Thomas E. Golden Junior Fellowship in Faith and Science. We are delighted that you are here this evening. I'm Father Eddie De Leon, the Assistant Chaplain here at the Center, and I'm filling in tonight for Father Bob DeLoyne, who is still recovering from knee surgery. This fellowship in Faith and Science began with the question, can 21st century science bring us closer to God? Over the past 10 years, we've explored various intersections of faith and science in the areas of evolution, cosmology, neurobiology, stem cell research, and today we have a further contribution to that dialogue. Tonight's fellowship is of particular importance because it is the first fellowship since Tom Golden's passing on October 29, 2011. Tom's presence is here tonight with us, although he is deeply missed. The God particle and the Large Hadron Collider project in Switzerland were topics very close to Tom's heart, and one of the reasons this fellowship was initiated. One of Tom Golden's closest friends is here tonight. You and I already know her, Kerry Robinson. Kerry Robinson is the Executive Director of the development of the National Leadership Roundtable on Church Management and Organization of Lay, Religious, and Clergy, working together to promote excellence and best practices Catholic parishes and dioceses around the country.
On July 4th of this year, 4 days before what would have been Tom Golden's 83rd birthday, I can promise you that Father Bob DeLoyne and I had identical reactions to the dramatic announcement broadcast across the world from CERN, the multinational research center in Geneva, which was this: Tom would have loved the Higgs Boson business. If only he was here to explain it to us. For Tom would have been able to explain it to us in meticulous and exacting detail, and no doubt it would have served as the primary conversation topic later that week when the three of us would enjoy our annual tradition of celebrating Tom's birthday together. To be sure, physics was not his primary field, but Tom had a formidable intellect and a curiosity that extended across multiple disciplines. A civil engineer by training, he was fascinated by the concrete, measurable, tangible reality. Voracious for knowledge, always seeking proof, he quite simply loved science. And it was a source of irresistible consternation to him that he could never quite explain the mystery of his intense and meaningful friendship with Father Bob and me, with this faith community, and even and especially with God. As Father Eddie has correctly noted, and was mentioned in the homily earlier today, Tom established and endowed this annual fellowship in faith and science with the expressed and urgent hope that 21st century science would bring us closer to God.
Let us now turn to tonight's topic of why the Higgs boson matters. Our Golden Fellow this evening is Father Michael Crosby, a Franciscan, whose ministry revolves around developing the spirituality of discipleship. Since 1973, he has been a pioneer among Catholics in promoting corporate reform through socially responsible investing, and was influential in getting Catholics to work with Protestant and Jewish communities in this effort at the Interfaith Center on Corporate Responsibility, ICCR. He has written 17 books, and his latest one is Repair My House, Becoming a Catholic Kingdom. We are delighted that he is here tonight. Our respondent tonight is Professor Paul Tipton, Professor of Physics and Director of Graduate Studies here at Yale University. Paul is a critically acclaimed scholar and author and a member of the ATLAS project. The ATLAS detector is a cylindrical geometry device used to study collisions of protons on protons, and is located at the Large Hadron Collider at CERN in Geneva. Please join me tonight in welcoming both Paul and Michael.
So it is a pleasure to be here in this beautiful space and to try to convey what I know Tom would want you all to know about the Higgs boson. So the Higgs boson has to do with mass and the modern theory of how mass comes about. And so I'm going to start by just giving us a brief history of the concept of mass. So really the first person to make any sort of quantitative study that involved mass was Newton, and his branch of science, Newtonian dynamics, has at its root a tenet that mass is sort of an inherent essential property of an object. So if you have a baseball, it's not a baseball unless it weighs what a baseball weighs. And if you cut the baseball in half, you'll have two halves, and each should have half of the mass. And if you and we believe that mass is conserved. So if you took half of the baseball and burned it, and then weighed the oxygen you add to it to make the combustion, and then weighed all the smoke and the CO2 and the ashes, it would all even out, so that mass is neither created and destroyed. So this very nice, neat picture of mass is sort of how physics lived until about 1905, and then it got a little messy. In 1905, Einstein put out 3 papers. One of the 3 basically said that light is chunky. Now, it was known that light was electromagnetic radiation, and that it was, pulsating energy, electromagnetic energy. But it was thought that it was continuous and that you could subdivide it as small as you want. But if you were to ask Einstein the question, can you make a light beam as weak as possible, as dim as possible, he would have said no. That there's a limiting factor, that you can't have less than one chunk of light, which is called a photon. And so this chunkiness, it sounds like a trivial feature, but it's not, because it instantly takes light from being a perfect wave to being both wave and particle. Light is like electrons. You never see a third of an electron hanging around. And you never see a half a photon. So this feature of light is very important, because it makes the subatomic very different. It's not the big made small anymore. And what we've done is we've posited that there's another field that's ubiquitous. It's everywhere. And when particles interact with that field, they gain mass. So it's like a particle that has to swim through this and get sticky and really interacts with it. It'd be like going through molasses, and that particle would be very massive. That type of particle would be massive. But there are other particles that can swim through this stuff just like a knife through butter, and these would be very low mass particles. And so this interaction sort of gauges and determines how massive an object is. And so, the cost of coming up with mass is this ubiquitous field that's, kind of spooky and surreal, but it's how things are, or at least that's what we think. Now, it turns out that the Higgs has, you might ask, how could you possibly test this theory? This field is nothing you can measure. And the answer is it actually does have one observable that's predicted by no other theory, and that is that this field that interacts with all things to give them mass can interact with itself and can sort of self-generate a particle. And when that particle is created, it's called a Higgs boson. So it's like the molasses comes up with like a molasses ball or something like that. So how might you find the Higgs? Well, it turns out you can't take Western Pennsylvania and chew it up, mine it up, and put it through a mass spectrometer and try to look for the Higgs. It doesn't work that way, because the Higgs is not stable. So in order to study it, you have to make it. And how you make it is you sort of run equals mc squared backwards, meaning you start with energy, very energetic protons, and collide them together such that their kinetic energy is then available to make matter. So normally in a nuclear reactor, we take a mass and crack it and end up with a final state that's a little bit lighter, and we liberate energy. But here we're doing the opposite. We're creating energy from matter. And we create billions of various things, and the Higgs boson is one of them. And the accelerator is the LHC. You can see it sort of in a faint silhouette behind this slide. And it's a 16-mile circumference 5,000 magnets, each as long as a tractor trailer. By almost any dimension, it's the largest machine on the planet. And so this summer, we announced that we discovered a Higgs-like object. It's produced as the Higgs should be produced at roughly the right rate. It decays into the things the Higgs should decay into, to the extent that we can tell with the low statistics we have. And its mass is in the allowed range because it's constrained by other experiments. So that's what the Higgs is, and that's the starting point for Father Crosby's talk to us tonight. So I'll invite you to come forward, and we'll do a mic transfer and so on.
Well, I'm very happy to be with you this evening, and I want to thank Father Bob for inviting me here. My remarks will be in three parts. I'm going to talk about the conflict, or the misnomer naming of the Higgs boson as the God particle, and that will lead me into some discussion of what the theoretical atheists are saying about the problem with religion and science, and then how this goes to a deeper problem regarding the two functions of science and religion. And then I'll get into the heart of my remarks, which is the need to get to some kind of common ground, if we can, in order to bring some kind of synthesis, or at least connectedness, around the notion of what we'll be calling spirituality. And so one of the biggest problems that scientists have with us in religion is the fact that we attribute to God what science itself has shown. And that came a lot around calling the Higgs boson the God particle. That's a total misnomer, especially if it implies that the basic element in creation is the one some of us call God. This unfortunate identification points to a tendency of many in religion to promote the so-called proofs for the existence of God, whom nobody has seen. First, we have Christopher Hitchens. He died this year, and I was going to put a cross behind his name, but I don't think he would like that. So let's just say he died. And then we have Richard Dawkins, Daniel Dennett, and Sam Harris. He sees, if you look at Dawkins, he says that there's a continuum of belief and disbelief within which you got different degrees of doubt. Sam Harris distinguishes between belief, faith, and religion, and we'll see spirituality. Can we find some kind of marriage, or at least some degree of happiness, with science and religion? It seems to me that what Pope Benedict XVI says, which is replicative of popes all during my 72 years since Pope Pius XII started writing about creation, Genesis, and so on. There's got to be a way to bring a better balance together. A very critical question. How can religion possibly survive what science is telling us? You got religion and you have science. What's the relationship? So what happened is that in that relationship, it assumes the twain shall never meet, because science is justified by fact, religion is justified by faith. Faith involves something that is not observable, but hopefully believable, and science is something that can be observed. They balanced what they knew as logos from science with mythos, addressing questions that science did not explain, especially the how did it become it. If the cosmologies of the ancient Near Eastern world could be purified and assimilated into the first chapters of Genesis, might not contemporary cosmology have something to offer to our reflections upon creation? Does an evolutionary perspective, he wrote, bring any light to bear upon theological anthropology, which means what does theology say about the nature of the human being? What does it say about the human being as an image of God? What does it say about the problem of Christology, and even on the development of doctrine itself? Here as logos, he is dealing with science as physics, phenomenology, cosmology. So you got the subatomic particles of physics, you got the mind and how we act to it, and studied here at Yale in biology, neuroscience. Third, you've got cosmology, including evolutionary biology and our convictions about the origin of our universe and the nature of human beings. And finally, I will suggest that you got the mythos of the ancient mythologies that are still, as Michael Dodd would say, overly tied to a flat earth faith. As a rapprochement, building on Armstrong, I suggest we consider logos as involving our heads and mythos our hearts. Or similarly, logos as left brain thinking and mythos as right brain thinking. With logos, everything is an it that involves questions about what makes something be its unique it. Mythos discusses questions about why we are connected. Now, when you take what Sam Harris says about this, remember we said it was belief, faith, and religion. He adds to this a fourth character, spirituality. And he calls spirituality, now this is a theoretical atheist. He equates mysticism, spirituality, and religious experience. It's a form of well-being intrinsic to our consciousness that goes beyond what you ordinarily experience. It said, the opening paragraph, scientists say they found a subatomic particle resembling the long, elusive Higgs boson, a landmark discovery that could explain why particles have mass, and by extension why stars, planets, and all other objects in the universe exist at all. I also believe that this God was revealed to the Jews by the name I Am, or I am the It. I also believe this God took on human form in Jesus. He was crucified because he basically said he wasn't separated from God and that he was one with God. Finally, I believe that in the resurrection, his followers experienced the living presence of this one now called the Christ, a new created order, in them, in a way that united them in a living body or organism. This is reflected in a wonderful quote that Pope Benedict said. The Trinity is not a reality that lives in isolation. And if you go to the macro level of what we know from cosmology, if you go to the micro level and get down to parts, you see that everything that exists down to that last particle, macro or micro, is a being in relation. And thus God-relatedness is revealed. And it's ultimately loving that shines forth. St. Bonaventure, back in the 1200s, said the created world is a kind of a book reflecting, representing, and describing its maker, the Trinity, at 3 different levels of expression. And so if you look at these 3 levels, everything basically in creation, Bonaventure says, is at least a vestige of God's I Am. Its hikchetas, or its thisness, is what it is because of connectedness. Then the next stage is male and female. They are imprinted, Bonaventure says, with God's Trinitarian image because of the way each can say I am equally in relationship. But when males and females become conscious of this connectedness and work toward becoming politically, economically, religiously what that is, they enter into the likeness of God. John O.F.M.Cap has said that it deeply, if you want to move to a theory of everything, you can find resonance in a theology of the Trinity. There are aspects of our scientific understanding of the universe that become more deeply intelligible to us if they are viewed from this Trinitarian perspective. In brief, we know that when we look at the Higgs boson, it is the it that makes all matter its particular it. It was there in the beginning. And we're also told by the Wall Street Journal that without it, no thing came to be. But when I see those same words, you can see why I went to my faith. Because in my faith as a believer, no thing can be without an ultimate it I call God. That God was revealed in history to the Jews as the I am it. And that God, I believe, is the arche, the originating source of the Higgs boson itself. In summary, we have science, and then we have faith. But science is telling us that each and everything we see here tonight is what it is because of the way its molecules connect and the way the atoms connect to make those molecules. Each of these is its unique isness because of the way the subatomic particles are connecting. And each electron and each and every proton and neutron that is made of quarks is its unique it, in part because of the Higgs boson, enabling them to have a unique mass from the energy. In a parallel way, as a Christian, as a person of faith, I believe God is who God is because of the way of connectedness and relationality. Each one can say, I am, precisely because of that connectedness. And in that, the energy is the spirit of their loving. This energy of loving called spirit is the energy at the heart of all energy in the universe, I believe. All creation has been made as its vestige, and every human being has been made in its image. When women and men, such as us, gathered here tonight, become conscious of this, our lives take on new meaning. We become even more committed to bring about this way of love in our world. That's our task in the universe. I don't expect my talk tonight will turn any non-believer, agnostic, or avowed atheist to my way of believing. However, I do hope that my reflections on why the Higgs boson really matters in the way I have suggested will invite those of us who do believe to develop a more compelling language for our age-old belief. If all matter ultimately exists because of the power of the Higgs boson, for me, it's also because of the one that I call the I am, the thou art, and the we are. The triune God who is equally lover, beloved, and loving. So ultimately, for me, it's not the Higgs boson that really matters as much as that energy or force of love I call God.